It's strange how I still remember the taste of that morning. The bitter dregs of instant coffee, the metallic tang at the back of my throat, the way the fluorescent lights in the university's committee room flickered and hummed like they were tired of their own job. I sat at the edge of a battered plastic chair across from 3 men and 2 women, all armed with papers and the sharp, watery stares of gatekeepers who'd long ago barred themselves from wonder. The head of the committee, Professor Musa, cleared his throat. The others shuffled folders. There was a faint whiff of yesterday's rain drifting from the cracked window, Nairobi's roads still groaning with dawn traffic. I pressed my knees together, fighting to keep my feet from bouncing under the table. "Mr. Mwangi," Professor Musa said, not unkindly, "we have reviewed your proposal. Building traditional instruments by hand, this, luthier, how does it connect to the needs of our modern technology program?" There was a moment of silent amusement flickering behind the committee's eyes. Maybe one of them stifled a sigh. I uncurled my fingers from my battered portfolio, the one with sketches of violins and orutus and the long detailed notes about Kenya's musical heritage. My throat felt dry. For a second, all I wanted was to say what I thought they wanted to hear. I'll do mechanical engineering, I'll learn computer science. I'll choose the sure thing. But I heard myself speak. Instruments are as much technology as computers are. They're made with craft and mathematics. They connect people. I want to study how to make them, so that our sounds, our culture, don't fade away. Sounds noble, Professor Musa said, voice unconvincing. But you could do that at home, yes? We can't sponsor experiments in hobby art. We need future engineers, not dreamers. A small, awkward laugh fluttered around the room. I swallowed. I'm not asking for a handout. Just let me show what I can do. This committee cannot recommend your admission, Professor Musa declared, briskly. But perhaps music school or a business course? Thank you for coming. I left with my portfolio squeezed to my chest, staring at the faded linoleum tiles as my shoes squeaked down the hall. Outside, the rain threatened again. I ducked my head, hoping no one would see the burning behind my eyes. My mother stood in the center of our little flat that evening. Both hands pressed to her forehead like she could squeeze out a miracle if she tried hard enough. My younger brother, Sam, sprawled on the couch with his phone. On the television, a political talk show raged. "You were rejected then?" she asked, not unkindly, just tired. "Yes, Mama. They said it's not useful work." She looked at the sagging shelves packed with books I'd bought from street vendors and the half-finished dulcimer resting on the table. "You have a clever mind, Daniel. This thing with the wood, it's not a serious career. You're chasing shadows." Sam snorted but didn't look up. "Who's going to pay for a wooden drum in 2020? Even musicians get their guitars shipped from China, man." Her eyes were wet and tight, blinking rapidly. "Try again next year. Choose something proper. You want to end up like your Uncle Joseph, repairing radios in that tin shed? That's not a life." I looked at my hands. "I'll figure something out, I promise." My mother turned away, fussing with the kettle as if its boiling could drown out her disappointment. A week later, my aunt came to visit. She clucked her tongue, poured herself chai, and made a show of concern. "Daniel, remember how you used to sing at church when you were small? You should teach music to children, maybe. This making instruments, it's not for men. What will people say?" Stories spread through the building. My classmate Anthony called, half mocking, "You building violins out of scrap, bro? Come help me work at my cousin's Boda Boda garage. Honest money, at least. No one needs a luthier in Nairobi." Even my friends started calling me Mozart as a joke. At parties, they'd nudge each other when someone played guitar. "Mwangi, maybe you can make us something from old spoons, eh?" The soft kind that leaves bruises. I began waking up early, catching the bus down Ngong Road to a neighbor's carpentry workshop. Mr. Otieno let me sweep the floors and sometimes handed me battered chunks of mahogany and pine. "Try making something. If you mess it up, just make shavings for the stove." I shaped my first real violin that way, working in streaks of sunlight and sawdust until my hands blistered and peeled. At night, I wrestled with the pieces in our kitchen, scraping and gluing by the glow of my phone flashlight. Sam would grunt as he passed, looking at the growing pile of wood chips as an invasion. "Careful, we'll all get termites from your hobby." I kept at it. I studied old books and sketchy YouTube clips. I bought wire and strings from hardware stores. I tried, I failed, I tried again. 3 months later, I had an instrument, rough but honest. I showed it to my family. My mother's lips tightened. Sam barely spared it a glance. "It's nice," my mother offered. As if she'd been forced to praise a toddler's ugly drawing. Every fiber inside me ached for someone to see what I saw. After rejection from another college, I started selling small wooden flutes and kalimbas at the Maasai market on weekends. Most days, walked by tourists were my only customers. The real musicians, buskers, street bands never looked at my table twice. I watched them tune battered imported guitars, never glancing at my makeshift attempts. One afternoon, an old man stopped, peering at my kalimbas with roomy but kind eyes. He picked up one, plucked its metal tongues. It sang, hesitant but clear. "You made this?" he asked. I nodded, feeling the old embarrassment bloom. He smiled. "We lose things if we stop making them. Don't listen to fools." He bought one for his granddaughter. After he left, I kept the note he'd pressed into my palm. He was the first who'd paid, not out of pity, but respect. That night I cried quietly into my pillow, not sure if it was sadness or relief. I found part-time work with a crafts collective in Kibera, learning how to turn scrap into art. They let me borrow their tools, let me pester the brass worker with questions, let me lose myself in the hum of shared labor. Sometimes the women who wove baskets would bring broken lyres from upcountry and ask if I could fix them. My work was clumsy, but I started earning coins here and there. One day a cousin came by. She laughed when she saw me bent over my tiny workshop. "You want to be famous with your sticks and glue? Don't you ever get tired?" I shrugged, fingers aching but unwilling to stop. If I give up, nothing changes. If I keep going, maybe something will. She shook her head, amusement shading her smile. "Stubbornness is the Mwangi mark." The years slid by slow and heavy. Nairobi changed. Apartment towers crept higher. Matatus screamed louder, and my hands remembered 1,000 tiny adjustments. My siblings moved on. Sam studied computers. My sister joined a bank. My mother's hair grayed. She avoided talking about university dreams. Small gigs began to find me. An Irish missionary commissioned a nyatiti. A young music teacher asked for starter flutes for her students. I started fixing instruments for church groups and school bands. Nothing extravagant, but steady. One rainy Thursday, a woman visited the collective. She introduced herself as Clara, curator from a new Nairobi music archive. She was hunting for local artisans to demonstrate traditional craft. I hesitated at her invitation. I was afraid, even after so long of fresh rejection. At her urging, I brought my best projects to the event: a mbira with whitewood keys, a violin varnished with acacia, a double bass made from reclaimed shipping crates. The hall buzzed with dignitaries, musicians, students. As I worked in front of them, planing, chiseling, carving, the questions changed. "How did you learn this? Could you teach us to repair? Can you make more?" A video clip someone recorded went viral. "Young luthier from Nairobi preserves fading art." I got emails, calls, commissions I couldn't meet. People who had once sneered, classmates, even distant family, added my name on Facebook. Still, the ache from the committee's laughter sat in my chest like old splinters. 6 years after that day in the university office, I walked into the staff lounge as a visiting instructor, carrying a case wrapped in navy blue cloth. The place was the same: yellow walls, harsh lights, sensible shoes squeaking on linoleum, but the faces were a little grayer, more drawn. Professor Musa looked up from a mug of tea. He blinked as he recognized me. "Mwangi?" "Professor," I nodded, feeling my pulse skip. "I'm here for the seminar on indigenous technology." He nodded, polite, perhaps a little uncomfortable. "Of course, glad to have you. I see you stuck with your path?" I didn't have time to answer. My contact came to fetch me. The auditorium, filled with students and academics, fell quiet as I set my violin and mbira on the presentation table. The crowd's curiosity softened something long frozen inside me. I spoke without stammer this time. I demonstrated the physics of sound, the geometry of resonance, the chemical tricks of Kenyan woods. I listened to young people's questions, their laughter, the way they handled my instruments as if they were treasure. I played a short song on the violin, the same melody I'd played as a boy in church. I watched the front row, where several of the old committee members sat. Their skepticism faded, replaced by the soft, involuntary awe that beauty brings when you... The day after, I took the bus home, cradling my battered workman's case across my knee. The city outside was both familiar and foreign. Hawkers banged on matatu windows selling roasted maize. SUVs jostled beside donkeys. My mind replayed the students' voices, questions about craft, about legacy and skill. There was a quiet, growing pride in knowing I'd made space, at last, for beauty and utility to meet. As I stepped into the apartment, Sam glanced up from his laptop, eyes flicking to the case. "So Mozart returns," he teased, but his grin had lost its cruel edge. I set the violin on the table. "Try it," I offered. He picked it up, turning it in his hands, running his fingers along the smooth varnish. "It looks real, expensive." "It is," I said quietly, thinking of hours spent over plans, of splinters and frustration, and every long cold morning at the market. My mother came in from the balcony, wiping her hands on her skirt. For a moment, she seemed uncertain, as if the instrument was fragile. She touched its scroll and smiled. "I saw you on TV," she whispered. "People recognize you now. Even my friend at church bragged her neighbor's son is famous." I laughed, soft and honest. Something loosened in my chest. I took her hand in mine. "Thank you for worrying, for pushing, even when you didn't understand." She blinked, holding my gaze. "You taught me to see beauty again, Daniel. Not many sons do that for their mothers." We sat together, my brother quietly plucking at the violin strings, the dusk creeping soft across the floor. Word spread. Family who'd once laughed now called to ask for instruments. My aunt brought her church choir, hoping I could mend an ancient lyre from Makueni. Some of the old neighbors dropped by, teenagers clinging to their sides, asking about apprenticeships. The community hall invited me to run a workshop, teach the next Daniel Mwangi, they said with a half grin. People who'd mocked the loudest now sat in the front row, their pride quietly stitched to mine. Even Anthony, the Boda Boda friend, turned up.